So as I'm sure you're aware, selecting the right font can either make or completely break your design. It sets the overall tone for the piece, and it's a big decision to make. In this lesson, I'll show you the combination of fonts that I'll be using, why I made those choices, and some tips to help you when you're experimenting and choosing your own fonts. So please follow along by opening this worksheet in the starting point template if you've downloaded that from the class resources. And really this is aimed to help you compare the fonts, especially if you're using different font families, in context and see how they interact with each other. So before we get started on this worksheet, just to jump across to the brochure that we're aiming to create and just look at some of the font pairings that I've used here. So we have, which I've enlarged just to create a sense of contrast, a really bold classic serif typeface as what you could call the main heading font, but I've combined that with quite an elegant ultra-modern font. And the font here is Future PT in the lightweight, and the font here you may recognize, it's a very popular font, Trajan Pro 3. So both of those fonts you'll have access to if you're using the Adobe suite. You can go to Adobe Typekit and install those on your machine with one click. But rather than just use exactly the same fonts I've used here, which would mean everyone following the class has almost exactly the same result, I'd like to show you some of the options, and perhaps you can choose a similar but different font for yourself. As we look down here, you'll see there's some places I've used the modern font for the subheading, and then for the body text, this time I've used Minion Pro. So overall, I found that sometimes this combination of a more classic standard font with an ultra modern, it gives the right balance of classic with a hint of modern rather than just old fashioned. If I scroll on to the contents, well, you can see there's a classic font used up here for the main heading, and then we have ultra modern and all caps, which again is quite effective, a nice way to draw attention for the page headings. And then we've got the classic serif again for the description. And one more example before we begin. If we go on to the next spread, and I'll show you how to create a drop cap like this, but this is quite nice. A clean, almost modern looking page, but the font itself, again, it's Minion Pro, it's that classic. So the best thing to do is experiment, depending on what you'd like to achieve. But if we come back to our starting point document and the fonts worksheet here, this is designed to give you some room to play and to experiment. Now I'm going to show you how to use a feature you may not have taken advantage of, and it's called paragraph styles. So if you don't already have this window open, you can just go to Windows, Type and Tables, Styles, and then Paragraph Styles, or F11 is the default shortcut. And paragraph styles are very powerful because they allow us to set the criteria for a particular element. So it could be this one here, which I've labeled description spaced. And if you double click on that, you'll see a large number of formatting options. And whatever you define here is going to apply to any element that you give this paragraph style later in the document. And to show how that works on the finished brochure, if I jump back across here, you'll see this section of a paragraph. Its look and feel is defined by this paragraph style. Body text with drop cap. These paragraphs here, regular body text. If I come up to the contents, and I've tried to organize these for you so they make a little more sense. So you've got folders inside the contents folder, which relates to this page. Contents large heading. You've got the contents title, could have labeled that page title. And then you've also got contents description. So what this means is, rather than, and you can imagine the time this would take, having to select and edit the properties of each of these descriptive paragraphs one by one. Perhaps you use the eyedropper, you copy, and then you apply. But even if you do that, it's a very fiddly job. So the idea is that because you've set these styles and you've applied them, and applying them, by the way, is as simple as selecting a body of text and just clicking one of these options. Once you've applied and defined them, you can change all the content that has this particular style by simply double clicking and changing the parameters here. So I could enlarge, and if you've got preview turned on, you'll see this change in real time. I could enlarge the size of every descriptive paragraph throughout the entire document, as long as I've attached that paragraph style to it. Make sure you deselect if you're playing with this. You don't want to accidentally apply something. But the same would be true for the contents title. I could reduce or enlarge the size. And you can have a play with this yourself. There's a large number of options. The most useful, I would say, are the fonts, the tracking, which is the spacing between letters, which you can see demonstrated there. And perhaps character color, although, and I'll explain this as we go through, I do tend to leave a specific color out of the paragraph style. And I apply that in a case-by-case, page-by-page basis. But it gives you a large degree of control over your content, and it makes it really easy to experiment and make changes. The disadvantage, as you can imagine, rather than just designing, shooting from the hip if you like, you've got to remember to apply these styles. So as you create a certain line of text, you've got to make sure you've got the relevant style applied. If you're a web designer, you'll be used to this. You have to have styles to format anything on the web. But if you're not a web designer, you might find this a little bit of a headache at first. But start getting used to it. Once this becomes second nature to you, it's going to save you a lot of time in the long run. And from a practical sense, if this were a brochure you created for a client, and rather than just the few pages we have here in this example, let's say you had a 20, 30 page document. If a client asked you to, throughout the whole document, reduce perhaps or enlarge the font size or the spacing of your paragraphs, that could be a real headache. And this is the difference between that change taking 10 seconds and potentially taking an hour or so, and a major headache. So having given you that overview, and if you click through, you can get an idea as these different styles are highlighted, which relates to which portion of text. I should warn you, there are just a few cases where I haven't used paragraph styles, and that's the case for this main we'll call it a makeshift logo and tagline for the brochure. I haven't applied paragraph styles to this. And also this page with prices, there's a style applied to the heading, but not to this, because it's unique in the document. And because it's unique, there's no real advantage to styling this. So other than that, you'll find if you're using either the finished version or the starting point brochure, which omits the fonts and omits the images, but does have the same styling set up and ready for you to configure, you should find that's very useful and will help you to learn as you go along. So let's jump into the fonts themselves and their choices. So for this, these two sections here are unstyled, because these are intended to be what you'll use as your makeshift magazine logo, if you like. So don't worry about paragraph styles for these two here. So the first thing I'd like to do when I look at these, although there's some contrast, which is interesting with a large difference in size, this feels a little bland. It's Arial regular. You know, it's not going to win any awards for exciting anyone. So let's pick something that's exciting one way or the other. So you could use a font like Lato, and that's a Google font. If you just search for it, you can download that for free. You could do something that's very light and elegant, and that has quite an attractive look to it. And you could contrast that by, if we use the same font family, using something a little bolder for the tagline. So you could take that kind of direction. That would create quite a modern looking, edgy magazine cover. If you want to follow the approach I've used, however, I've gone for a real classic. So Trajan Pro, and there's a link for you to download that on the links page if you'd like to use the same. Trajan Pro regular, and you compare that. You could use a tagline as we have this formatted here. Lato and bold would be a good choice, but you can further emphasize the contrast by using something a little lighter. I think regular is quite good. And then the tracking, which is just here if you're not familiar with InDesign. If you really extend the tracking, go all the way up to 550, that's quite nice. I really like this look and feel, and you can see something like that in place on my finished version here. Although in this case I think I've used Futura PT. I've gone for the lightweight, and the tracking is just 200. So please feel free to experiment. So when you found a combination you like the look of here, you can copy, go back to the first page of this starting point document, and you can paste it. If you have smart guides turned on, you'll see that magenta line when that's aligned directly to the center. If you hit the W key, that will bring up the grids, the margins that I've put in place. So plenty to help you to position this in a nice even way. And you could either delete what I had in place here already and just shift your version up. That looks quite good. Of course, you're going to place your own brand name, and you can make up an appropriate tagline. So you could do something like that, or you could edit the version I had there in place directly. And once you're happy with that, my suggestion would be to come back down to this fonts page. And now that you have a rough idea of the font families you might want to use, you can begin setting these placeholder paragraphs. And these relate and are linked to paragraph styles that you'll find I've used later on in the document, with the exception of the contents page, and we'll come to that in a future lesson. So as I click on this paragraph here, you'll see that if you set a format for this, it's going to set your format for the body text with a drop cap throughout the entire document. Just as an aside, if you're interested, you can add a drop cap to any paragraph you like if you know where to look. And it's simply this option here. Down in the paragraph window, there's a little drop cap symbol. You can choose the number of lines that cap will drop. So formatting it in InDesign is as simple as that. So having seen the end result, you already know what I'm going to choose for my body text. And if I double click this to open it and go to the second option down, let's just make sure you can see my entire window there. You know that I'm going to choose Minion Pro, which is a classic. So Minion Pro regular, and apply. And I really like the way that looks, and that of course really lends itself to the drop cap and this kind of classic magazine feel that I'm going for. I'll then need to reflect that in the regular body text without the drop cap. So again, I'll double click, go to basic character formats, and I think I can type an M perhaps to jump down, and there we are, Minion Pro comes up as suggested. I'll click OK, and that's applied for paragraph style. Now the advantage is using this worksheet, not only have I updated the font here, but as you scroll forward through the document, as I said, the contents page that has its own settings which we'll come to, but you'll see that the options you just configured on the worksheet page, they've now applied themselves here to every other location. And if I select, you can see you've got the drop caps, body text, and a regular body text. It's applied it throughout the whole document. So as you complete that worksheet, you can jump ahead and actually see in real time how that's looking in situation further in the document. Let's format the collection headings now, and just to explain that briefly, if I jump ahead to the finished brochure, in my example, there are a few pages where there are headings, titles for what I've called collections. So you can see here in the finished example, I've used Trajan Pro 3, which ties this in to the main heading and to the style of this would-be logo. So let's do that here. So collection heading 1, and I've shown you the method of double clicking and then setting the style here, but there is another method, and I'll take this opportunity to show you. So if you select the text box that you wish to apply your change to, or select that direct portion of text that you wish to style, and this time directly change it. So under character, we'll select Trajan Pro 3, regular, and there we can see it's updated. Now under paragraph styles, you can see it's still linked to this collection heading style, but there's a plus next to it. And what that plus means is you've linked this, but you've done something different. And you have two choices. If you open up the flyout menu here, you could either redefine the style. So InDesign will then update this style to match exactly what you've done here. Or if you right click on it, you can apply the current settings you've got saved for this style, and you can clear the overrides. And I'll do that and then undo it to show you that would revert it back to what we had before. I'll undo, and what we want to do is click the flyout menu and redefine that style. So now all the collection headings should draw on this style here. This also applies to color. So if I select these two text boxes and you want to just make sure your formatting is affecting text, there's this tiny little tooltip that pops up here when you click on the relevant icon. And now whichever color you set, and I'm going to do that from the swatches panel, will apply to the text. If I open paragraph styles again, you should see that with this text selected, we've got that little plus. And that plus in this case is indicating that the color we've selected for this portion of text is different to the base color in our styles. So I hope that's not too confusing. The more you use this, the more it will make sense. So again, if we scroll ahead to our collections pages, you can see that's now updated those fonts, the collection headings, on both the dark and the lighter page. So if you're following along closely, you've probably realized there's just one more text element we're yet to format, and that is indeed this one, the description spaced as I've labeled it. And I like to increase the spacing. If I go to the finished version on a page like this, I think it just lends a little more elegance to the design, and we could either style it directly from here, or we can style it from our worksheet page. The choice is yours. But if you select that text frame, and this time let's double click, and again I'm going to, just for consistency, use Minion Pro. There we are. If you weren't happy with the spacing, let's say you don't agree with me, it looks a little unusual to you, you can reduce the leading here by altering that same paragraph style. If we bring it down to, let's see, 20 to 14, that's a little more mainstream. Click OK, and then as you jump ahead to the corresponding pages, you'll see that's updated for you. By the way, what I've used here is just Latin placeholder text. It's a feature in InDesign. If you right click within a text frame, you've got the option to fill with placeholder text. So that's what I've used just to give you something to format and to play with. You could keep that for this portfolio piece. It will probably be small enough that no one actually stops to try to read the text. But of course, if you wanted, you could come up with copy to make your example seem even more realistic. But in any case, congratulations for following along to this point. You've hopefully now completed this worksheet. You have your font choices in place. You're hopefully happy with the way they complement each other, with the harmony between them, with the tone they're giving to your document. So with that in place, we're now ready to make some more decisions, this time with our color palette.